Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I am so excited for this next panel. I've been really excited about this panel for the entire time since we started this event. This is our final panel of the day, so please come back and join us tomorrow at 3 o'clock Eastern. We've got another great slate of panels and speakers tomorrow, so hope to see you there. Now, I'd like to bring on Mr. Tony Alexander, the president of Made in Memphis Entertainment, who is going to moderate this next panel, Talk the Talk, How to Successfully Work with Banks. Hi, Tony.
Hello, Portia. Thank you.
I'm so happy to see you, and this is exciting. So I'm just going to let you take it away because I want to see it.
Oh, sounds good. Thank you so much. Well, we'll bring in the rest of the group and we'll get started. All right, welcome. Again, I'm Tony Alexander. I'm the co-founder and president of Made in Memphis Entertainment. And we have with us today Cassandra Williams, Ben James, and Katrina Fry. And we're going to let them introduce themselves and then we'll get into the conversation.
Hi, I'm Cassandra Williams with Hope Credit Union and Hope Enterprise Corporation. I lead our community and economic development work here in Memphis. Happy to be here.
Hi, my name is Katrina Fry. I'm coming to you live from Los Angeles, California. I am the CEO of Loretta Records, a brandly newly minted independent music label here for the hustling artists trying to blend sync music where the money is with our love and our passion and our catalog. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Tony.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ben James. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm with Iberia Bank First Horizon Sports and Entertainment Group. I'm happy to be here and ready for a great discussion.
Well, thank you, everyone, for being here with us. And we have a great group with us today. And so we're just going to take a few minutes just to ask some general questions. And if you have questions you want to drop into the comments, we're more than happy to try to entertain those as well. But I wanted to start by just asking a few questions for our bankers to just really get a sense of kind of what are the differences, if any, that you see between your traditional banking clients and those that are in the entertainment industry, if you see any differences in your experience.
I'll take a first stab at it, Tony, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I've been in banking going on 20 years, and the first part of my career, I worked with what I would call more traditional industries, manufacturing, distribution, so forth, and started working in entertainment after I had already had that background. And you know, the difference that I see between the two, I see a lot more similarities than differences. The difference is that most of the general world, they're so focused on just the creative process of the entertainment business that they sometimes neglect the traditional business infrastructure that's also in place. So they're very unaware, and they're, you know, for a lot of people, when they hear about a music deal, they're so focused on somebody sitting in a room writing amazing lyrics and coming up with you know, musical composition, and it seems magic to them. And there is certainly magic to a creative process, but there's a business components that also go into a successful music career. So the difference that I've seen between those who have navigated the banking world and the entertainment space is really knowing and understanding the narrative, making sure that if you're working with a bank, that they are the proper storyteller for what it is that you do, and that they really understand the industry. So it really does, you know, for me, come down to knowledge of being able to convert music and entertainment industry vernacular into banking speak, for lack of better words, to get people within the bank comfortable.
Great. Cassandra, did you want
to? I think I would definitely agree with Ben. I think the narrative piece, being able to have the relationship with your banker is important. Um, and then, but not missing the fact that some people aren't comfortable with, um, you know, that they actually have access to a banker, that they can have a relationship with the banker, because they might have had some challenges or whatever the case might be. So I think breaking down that barrier and, understanding that there is access, I think, for them, and a willingness for banks to help and assist.
So, and I think that that's a great segue to kind of explore a little bit um, in the mindset that you just spoke about, Cassandra, of an artist that might come and say, well, I'm not sure that I can have a banking relationship because I may have had some issues in the past. I don't have a steady income. There are a lot of different factors that might cause them to self-select out of a relationship. So, how can I, as an artist or a producer or someone who's launching a label, how can I prepare for the interactions that I'm going to have with the bank so that I can maximize my likelihood of success?
Um, I would say it really starts with the bank, and we're a credit union. Hope is a credit union. We're 27 years old, operating throughout the Deep South. So in places that traditionally have not extended credit, in a lot of cases, the Mississippi Delta, the Black Belt of Alabama. So there has not been access in those places. So to have a financial institution that's saying, hey, we're minority led, we're focused on providing access to people that have not had those resources, um, and we're in your community, lifting that up. It's about ensuring that people know, and a lot of times that's word of mouth. It's you know being a nonprofit, you don't have all of the marketing dollars, but when you do help somebody, they're going to tell somebody, and it's been a good experience. So I think the more the financial institution can anchor itself and have some wins, some success stories out there, and walk alongside people. I think that's a missing piece um, when you don't have an accounting background or an accountant to say, hey, these are the financials that I need to have, that you need to have. You need to have a tax return that actually shows that you can repay the debt. You can't show that you haven't made any money if you're expecting to come to the bank, and receive access to resources. So it's really about education and walking alongside people.
So let me ask this. So if I'm an artist and I have not really established a long-term relationship with a financial institution, would the first step for me be to come and establish a deposit relationship by opening up a checking account, a savings account, so that we can begin the dialogue and you can learn more about me and I can learn more about you, to kind of speak to what Ben was talking about before, being able to start telling my story in a language that the fellow bankers would understand. And so is that the best way to start, or how would I approach this? And this is for either you, Ben, or for Cassandra. On how would a deposit relationship be the first place to start?
And you want to take
Yeah, no, I think a deposit relationship is an excellent way to start, to get to know one another, especially if it's being managed properly. What I mean by that is, obviously if the depositor is not, you know, overdrafts and so forth, but let's assume that it's being managed the proper way. Um, it's a good way for the bank to get a pulse of how your business operates when deposits are coming in, in a large amount, when they're going out in a large amount. I think of it in terms of, the music creation process. And if you're a production company, you might see a huge inflow on at the beginning or certain times of the year when when certain productions start, and then you start seeing outflows as a, for lack of better words, manufacturing process begins to create the content. So I think it's an excellent way, so that someone can get a pulse of what your cash flow, your working capital cycle looks like, right? And what I'm doing now is I'm using both banking terms and a little bit of industry terms so that people can understand this is how bankers think, right? A lot of times, people, they'll say, well, I just got a huge advance, and someone who's maybe not as astute in terms of what that means in the music industry, they'll be like, okay, what does that mean? What comes with it? And those are all legitimate questions. And as a banker who's trained and understands the music industry, like I know that's the beginning part of their working capital cycle. I know that funds are going to go out, and I'm understanding of how that works. But yeah, the deposit, I think, is a good way to get a pulse. And then as things begin to develop, when someone is looking for a line of credit, or they're looking to maybe purchase their own studio, which would require a commercial real estate loans, the bank already has an excellent idea of how the cash flow works, and they can begin to be an advocate for you inside of the bank, because they've already are able to map out a good story to communicate with their banking partners.
Okay, great. And so, in thinking about that, I know oftentimes, people think, okay, I can make a deposit today, and then maybe I can talk about a loan tomorrow. But that's why it's so important to build the relationship over time, not just by assuming putting money into the bank, you've built a relationship. The relationship also means meeting and talking with the people. And so I know, Katrina, you have some experience in this regard, being an artist and a manager and dealing with your new label. So kind of share some of your experience and how building a relationship really benefited you.
Yeah, it's great to hear the basics, and I think I'm kind of at this in between level where now I have been approved for the PPP just recently, and before that I was approved for a line of credit, and before that we had a business credit card. So I've seen kind of different little elements along the way, since I do have a 10-year career in music in those different angles, and so I've been able to coach people in different ways. But for me personally, I think what's astounding every time you go to a bank is how much paperwork you need and the paper trail. And so I think what you're talking about, this idea of like, yeah, I put in my $50 and I'll just do that once a week, or you think in basic terms, and really a bank is trying to, when you talk about a story, like the story of my life is complex. So the story of your banking is probably complex. And the more detailed and rich it can be, the better it is for you. So I think for me, growing up, at least in my household, my dad was like, do this one thing and then like don't have debt and don't owe anybody money, like very traditional in that way. Don't put your money in a bank, like those kind of notions. And I think getting now to an ownership side, you're like, I wish I would have started this and kind of talked to more people, asked more questions. And for two reasons. One, I think now you learn a lot of mistakes I could have been avoided by just talking to people, especially my line of credit was through Wells Fargo. And the first thing they said when we came in to ask for that line of credit was, do you have 3 years of tax returns? Do you have a profit and loss statement? Do you have an accountant? And luckily I had done all those things because I had music mentors along the way who said to do all those things. But I was just using QuickBooks online. I didn't know if it was going to be like too basic. And then the second thing they said was, yeah, we would love to start drafting papers today because you've been with Wells Fargo for 10 years. So, it kind of like hit me in that moment that I hope everyone really understands how much of a long and complex and a rich story you really have to build to even get to that space where people trust and start to really see you're good on your word, that you have made those payments, that big monies have come in, you haven't overspent on them. So that really helped a lot. And then for me, I had the blessing of going to grad school, so I had to work through an accounting class, and the best thing that I ever learned was how to work on a cash flow budget. So for a lot of artists, we're told to work on like a traditional budget where, you hear from like a 9-to-5 person, like, yeah, I know my salary. And so I know how to work that money throughout the year. I get paid twice a month, all of those luxuries that we are not given in our realm. So really, I have to project. I make like a plan A, we get paid all the monies, and a plan B, maybe not all the monies come in, so I have to kind of always work on basically a 3-month cash flow budget where I have to know, okay, if everyone's good on their word, all these monies come in, like I'm talking about sync and licensing money. I could get placed today, get paid in 6 months if everything goes properly. Say paperwork doesn't go through, it could be a year. We work in the realm of time. That's our number one resource as artists. So you do a lot of things for free, and I just tell people then you also need to note all those things and hope, try and really weigh out the pros and cons of what you're doing. And for me, the cash flow budget has really helped a lot to really see what I can do. And I was able to bring all that into Wells Fargo to get all the things that I've been granted. But I hope that answered your question a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's great because it's essentially the process of functioning like an entrepreneur, knowing that you have to manage your cash flow. And I think that is certainly, I've heard Ben mention that, and it just makes a lot of sense that in a lot of ways, one of the things that makes an entertainment client similar to other clients that come into a financial institution is that an entertainment client and other entrepreneurs, whether it be in the healthcare industry, whether it be in technology, they come with very similar financial profiles. And so if financial institutions are used to working with entrepreneurs, they will be used to working with the profile that would be presented by an artist or a label or other entrepreneurial venture. And so I think that's really important. So if I could present this question to the bankers again, from your point of view, how would you like a new client to present themselves and their financial information to you that would assist them in maximizing a good result?
I think Katrina, she's a wonderful example of what,
Yes.
like the perfect client would be. But a lot of times people don't come that prepared. They don't have the, that accounting in college. They're an artist and they haven't been exposed. But to understand that piece of it, when you don't have an accountant, but you do know how to balance a checkbook, if you will, or keep your account out of the negative. Can we start with that? Like no overdrafts. And ensuring that, you are positioning yourself, if you will. Maybe you have had the negative marks on your credit, but taking those steps to, work through those issues, just don't ignore them. Because if you are going to deal with the financial institution at some point, you will have to address those. And I think, hope is a good place to hit the reset button to allow people to do that. And, having products that are specific, for that purpose is really good. We have a product called Borrow and Save, where you can borrow a certain portion and you save a certain portion of the loan, and you pay it out over time, and it's reported to the credit bureau. So that gives a person the opportunity to, start over, hit the reset button. borrowing against your own funds, things like that to reestablish yourself. But yes, a perfect client is Katrina, who came with her cash flow statement. She came with, QuickBooks. She's been working in it, and she has her tax returns last 3 years. She said it, and Well stepped up to the plate and obviously, helped you along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I do
That
have to
that's
say, oh yeah, I was just gonna say too. One thing that happened before that too is that we actually consolidated all of our credit cards, because what you're saying is actually when we first got into the industry, like my husband and I at 21, everyone just told us get credit cards. Like that's what every manager, every label, everybody told us, just get credit cards, get the best one. That's all I heard. And so we actually had to consolidate all that credit first to get ready then, and I will say that was like 3 hard years of just like really waiting and paying everything on time and, paying off more than we even thought. But I will give that caveat. I don't want to look perfect. So.
But
Yeah,
I
no.
think, yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, no, I was going to add, in the consistent theme for, those that are listening that, I think they should really pick up on, especially with Katrina and her success is, preparation. Preparation has allowed her to be successful in terms of, getting capital from a bank or any other financing source. And, the one thing that I recommend, and Katrina, you kind of mentioned it when you were kind of giving some of your background is, you want to know ahead of time, and knowledge and education, as Cassandra mentioned, is the difference between having success and not. And I would challenge people to, just like any other place in your life, find a mentor, talk and be open and candid about what did it take. I feel like money sometimes in banking is, for a lot of people, is a very taboo subject. They're scared to talk about it. They're afraid to share. But the one thing that I've learned is the more you share, the more you talk about it, the more information you'll get, and the more successful you'll be. So, the one thing I'd love to point out, and Katrina again is a great example of that, is preparation. It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. 10-year relationship with a bank, 3 years of preparing even before asking for a loan. Those are some of the critical things that I think allow someone to be successful outside of the on paper that you can show that you can repay the loan.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really good, and it's I think it's interesting that you point that out, Ben, about the taboo subject. I think just like people don't want to talk about dying and preparing a will or a trust, they don't really want to talk about banking much either. It's one of those the situations where people rarely do you hear people talking about their banker. They're often talking about other things, but the banking relationship can be one of the most important relationships you can have, and so making sure, like any other relationship, you start developing a rapport before you need the relationship to kick in your favor. I think
That's
that
right.
most of us know that there have been people that we've been building a relationship with for most of our careers, and we've never asked them for anything. But we know at some point we may have to make that phone call, and we're just trying to wait until the right time. And I think we have to kind of take the similar approach when it comes to banking, is that the bank is certainly there for you, but we can't come to the bank asking for things before we've established a relationship. And so I think that that's critical. But what's beautiful, and I certainly, this is not intended to be a commercial, but with Cassandra and Hope, uh, one of the interesting things about that institution, I think we all remember that when Reed Hastings and Netflix had indicated that they were going to deposit a significant amount of money into Black banks. They announced of 3 banks initially, and Hope was one of them. And it was in part because they believe in what the organization stands for. And I think that Cassandra kind of talked about it a little bit, and we probably would have her explore it some more. But if you look at the profile of many of their customers, they're not necessarily the customers that traditional banks are that interested in certainly recruiting. They'll accept the deposits, but they're not going out recruiting this clientele. And so, Cassandra, if you wouldn't mind just kind of sharing a little bit about, some of the other programs and initiatives that you have to kind of approach banking in a very different way to support I guess the ecosystem in the Deep South.
Yeah, I think and thank you for that. I know this is, this isn't a Hope commercial, but I think it's important to know that, and for people to know, as I said earlier, that there is a financial institution that has, been in existence for the last 27 years, providing access to resources where, people have not had them, and particularly people of color. So, having a small dollar loan product when someone, has a challenge and they don't have to go to a predatory lender, they can come to, their local credit union to get a loan that is not predatory. When in our footprint, you're talking 500% interest. And even online, we've run across loans with 1,000% interest, which is, it sounds crazy, but it's true. And you can get, the loan, you establish the relationship, and you're able to, you know, have that personal banker for people who are black and brown, and that's it. Small business lending. Hope was started to support small businesses in the Mississippi Delta, the Arkansas Delta, Louisiana Delta, because the need was so great. Started as a $1.5 million loan fund, and because you have such a great need, from the credit union to all of the, I guess, issues throughout the Deep South. When you talk about poverty, you talk about, healthcare, the lowest healthcare outcomes, educational outcomes, and having programming around those issues. Hope is looking to address those through providing financial resources in those areas. So
Well,
I'll stop there because I could just go on and on.
well, and I think that's great, because you brought up a subject that I think is important for us to discuss, because there is a lot of money, particularly from private equity, coming into the music industry. And in a lot of ways, artists may not have had traditional relationships with banks. And so they're seeing opportunities to put some of their content up as collateral. So I'd want to explore a couple of things. One, kind of talking about, and Ben, maybe you might want to talk about this a little bit, of what has been traditionally serving as collateral for creatives in certain transactions, and also trying to get them to understand, with some of these alternative funding sources, whether it be it, you know, I guess putting up their publishing catalogs, or giving up their royalty streams in a non-traditional way, because there are a lot of new groups that are coming to the fore, that are taking advantage of the financial hardships that creatives are finding themselves in. How can banks and other financial institutions be helpful in that regard, to assist creatives without them finding themselves in a situation where they very well may lose their life's work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Tony. And I will tell you, over the last, 8 to 10 years that I've been in the business, you have seen a wider range of capital, I'll call them capital providers, in the creative space and more specifically music um, as people have become more astute in terms of what music royalty streams look like and how to value them. There was a time where there was only a handful of banks that truly understood the space that would lend against music publishing assets. And now, I will even say in terms of financing, oftentimes, you know, hedge funds, private equity funds, and so forth are coming into the space. So it's become a little bit more complex. And I can see how someone who's, not understanding of what those institutions, what they really do, they might flash a big number, but what does that mean in terms of me still owning, my life's work? What happens if I miss a payment? Um, you know, so I will share with you from, the bank's perspective. Iberia First Horizon has a long history of working with creatives in the space. During COVID, we were able to get very creative with helping out those who, traditionally earned income by touring and they were unable to tour. Um, but we have worked on deals where royalty streams were taken as collateral. A music publishing catalog has been used as collateral. And the one thing that I will say is that as a traditional lender, and sometimes people don't understand this, is at the end of the day, I don't want your asset. I just want you to repay my loan, right? And that I am not a music executive. I am at the end of the day, I'm truly a lender. If if I loaned you $100, I want the $100 back. That's success for me, right? Um, so I think people need to understand and appreciate who you're working with. So when you're working with myself or institutions similar to mine, um, sometimes the process seems like, oh, it's long. Oh, why are you asking so much information? But what they have to understand is that with that, yes, we are protecting the bank to ensure that what we take as collateral is safe for us, and the cash flow associated is safe. But we're also doing it for the client's benefit as well. There have been many times where we've gone through legal due diligence processes, and clients didn't realize that someone had a lien against something, or they thought they were recouped and they weren't. These are all things that are kind of flushed out during the legal due diligence process, and you can learn a lot about what it is that you own. But again, a bank like mine, I really just want you to repay the loan. I do not want to have to own it at the end of the day. And when there's other financial institutions, whether it be hedge funds, private equity funds, really sit down and understand beyond the number that they're flashing in front of you, whether it be a loan or they're going to buy a certain percentage of your music catalog, what that really means. Because all money is not good money, and you really need to understand what strings come attached to them.
Yeah, that's a great point. So let me do a follow up on that. So if we were to try to compare intellectual property to real property, are there similarities between real estate and the intellectual assets that a creative might have? Because I think sometimes early on in a career, I know artists hear a lot, own your masters, keep your publishing. They hear that, but in a lot of ways, I don't think they know what they're holding on to. So, are there similarities between those assets and how a financial institution might value them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you hit the nail right on the head with the last word you used, which was value. A lot of people are unaware that when it comes to intellectual property, and I'll use music as an example, there are valuation appraisal companies out there, just like there are for a real estate transaction, right? So oftentimes, banks will say, "Hey, I will loan you." Um, a certain percentage loan to value as it relates to your intellectual capital pending a appraisal or valuation. That's the same concept that a lot of banks use as it relates to real estate. Now, it has to be in conjunction with, cash flow to be able to, repay the debt. But it starts with, what is the value of what we're taking as collateral? So it's also seeking out within the ecosystem other professional service providers to help kind of pull the pieces together. And if you're building a relationship with your bank and you really want to know and understand if they truly understand your industry, that might be a leading question that you ask is like, hey, I'm building out my music portfolio. At some point it might be advantageous for me to, use it as collateral. Who does the bank use as, a valuation company? And if they don't know, that's probably an indication that they really haven't done lending like that before. And you may want to reconsider who you're working with. If someone were to ask me right now, I can rattle off at least 3 people that I regularly work with.
Yeah,
So it's making
that's great.
Yeah, and it's making sure that it's like a carpenter, right? You want to make sure that your carpenter has the right tools for the job. Same thing with the bank.
Yeah, that makes good sense. And so, in thinking about that from the artist's perspective, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, and that is the discomfort in having these kinds of conversations early on, by saying, this is what my future might hold. How can we start developing a path so that at some point in the future, I will have all of these different resources at my disposal? For example, I don't want to get a line of credit when I'm strapped. I want to get a line of credit when I don't need it, so that in the event something were to occur, I could tap that line of credit and do some things. So I think if you could kind of kind of look out into the audience, the virtual audience, and just speak to potential clients and tell them, these are the things I would like for you to ask me, because they're ultimately going to help you. What are some things that would probably be good things that you would like to point out? Cassandra or Ben or even Katrina, if you would like to kind of just speak to everyone and just say, this is what I would like for you to ask me. Don't just sit there in silence and just hope that we just assume the relationship's developing. These are the things you should be asking me along the journey to make sure I'm best prepared to tell your story.
That's it. I think Ben has already touched on a number of things, and he probably has the most experience coming from, that's the industry that he's worked in. But I look at it as, in a lot of cases, just a small business owner, and the things that I would want them to have. And we've talked about those things. It's have you tracked what your financial situation looks like? Do you keep even QuickBooks? Like you said, well, I just had QuickBooks, but that's important. Like QuickBooks, your inflows and your outflows, you're able to track that. So, do you have, and I'm talking about just the basic, I look at it as a independent contractor in some cases, that until you get the huge contracts, obviously. Yeah. People are doing gigs, they're getting, resources in, but you still need to know what your cash flow looks like. If you don't understand cash flow, can you help me understand, Miss Banker, what cash flow looks like, for me as an artist? What does that mean to you? Are there particular insurances that I need to have? Is there a requirement for collateral? Do you have any and in our case, we have some programs where if the person does not have collateral or the collateral is short, we have a Wells Fargo was mentioned, but diverse community capital program, where if there is a shortfall in the collateral, then, you know, we can utilize some of those resources to help. So, you know, people wouldn't know that, but hopefully the banker would, and you know, they would offer that to them. But are there resources that can assist me if my collateral is short or I don't have any collateral? I will at some point, but I don't have any right now. What can you do to help? And I'll stop there. Let Ben jump in.
Yeah, no, and thank you for that. And you know, I will just add, you know, because I think that what Cassandra just shared was really the meat and the potatoes, the tangible things that we look to have. The one thing that I will share with everyone is there's the intangibles that I look for clients to have, and the biggest one is discipline. You know, success is usually the result of someone being disciplined and doing a lot of the right things, small things, over a long period of time. So as you share your story with me, and goals are going to be set, I would just ask that you have the discipline when I share with you, this is the path that we're going, and here are the milestones that need to be met, to have the discipline to be able to do that. Far too many times, especially when it comes to money, you know, people tend to want to enjoy the moment, and they, you know, they get a little, you know, sparkle in their eye, and they may deviate, and that happens. We've all done it, but we have to keep the big picture in mind. So, you know, having the discipline to trust in the process, I think is the most critical.
Right. Well, let me ask this question along the same lines. So when thinking about the hesitance that many um, artists might have, or just small business owners, entrepreneurs might have, they think that unless I have a very large deposit, I'm not likely to be able to have a relationship with anyone other than the teller. Um, is it feasible for me as an independent artist to be able to have a relationship with you, Ben, or you, Cassandra?
Oh,
Can I actually talk to you, or do I have to reach a certain level
oh,
of
uh,
financial status?
so I'm really gonna let people in behind the curtain with this comment. Yes, I'll be candid with you. I want a relationship before you get big, because trying to chase you when when you've already made it, and try to do, you know, with everybody else, that's hard. And you know, I'm getting older now, and I would prefer not to sprint if I don't have to. I like to walk down the hill slowly. So yes, I will tell you, and candidly, I start relationships with people um, with nominal amount of money. You know, you'd be surprised. There are, and I'll just share this about, you know, a new entertainment, an aspect of entertainment that's growing. You know, esports. You know, I've been educating myself about esports, and you know, for the last several years, and I have had many discussions with people who, you know, they have started out as, hey, I'm doing this part time, and you know, within a year they're making mid to high six figures, right? um so I will tell you, I am, and my mother says this all the time, that I talk too much. I like to talk to everybody. I literally do. I love what I do. I love sharing. At my core, I'm an educator. I like to see people be successful, especially when they exhibit the, you know, a level of discipline. So you can, if you have $25 and you're disciplined, I'd rather work with you than the person that has 25 million, and I know it's going to only go down from there.
Yeah, I would agree with Ben. Of course, to have a relationship with the credit union, it is just a minimal deposit to open your basic share account, and with the credit union, that's ownership. So you have to buy stock in other companies, but to have a share account with a credit union, that's you're a member owner at that point. And so you get to come to the member meetings and make have influence on the decision making in your credit union because you're a member. So yes, to have whatever that basic account is, that membership account, your savings account, that to get you started and get that relationship going, we'll definitely start there. I totally agree with Ben.
And that's really good to hear because I know that I hear people say it all the time. They assume that having a banker is a status thing, that you have to reach a certain level before you can have a conversation with people in the financial institution. It's kind of like when you're a kid and you're not real comfortable going to the teacher or professor during office hours because you just assume that's just not appropriate for everybody. And so it's good to hear that not only are you accessible, but in those conversations we're going to be able to glean the kinds of insights and get a window into the decision making process so that the more we talk with our bankers, the greater the likelihood we're going to be able to shape our financial future in a way that's going to be mutually beneficial for the financial institution and for us. So that's good to know. So I guess, Katrina, one thing I wanted to kind of give you an opportunity. I know you're the model citizen when it comes to how you've navigated this. But if there's some questions from the perspective of a label owner, as a small business owner who is dealing with not only your business, but also the livelihoods of artists that have entrusted you and your label, are there some questions you might have for Ben or Cassandra that might be beneficial?
Yeah. Well, I think two things I'm also just like kind of replaying in my head, trying to, I'm a constant learner too. And I think, luckily, Tony, you're my mentor. So you gave me great advice the first time we talked, which is that your dreams should scare you. And I think when it comes to banking and money, we've actually been told the opposite, like, hide it under the rug, and those people who do live it scary, like they're obviously in a whole nother realm. And I think what I'm hearing from both of the bankers in the house is like, actually come and share that dream too with your banker, because they might be the one to get it to that crazy level. And I think that's just like something I want to put out to whoever's watching this, is like, that's something I'm gleaning and really leaving very hopeful and very excited about, is that making sure if you want them to tell your story, you come to them at the beginning of your storytelling and be detailed and be scary, like put it out there, be vulnerable, how far you want to go. And I think for me, that's how I got to this label, because I was managing for a long time, and that's always taking pennies out of artist pocket, after. And it just never really sat with me, and it's not a legacy I want to leave, and it doesn't really feel like I'm giving back to the people I wanted to give back to. So I wanted to go to a different side of the table. I wanted to be on the offering side with the label. But right now I'm really trying to figure out, to be an artist friendly label, I don't have a lot of ownership now as a label. And so I'm really trying to figure out, what equity do I have? What do I have for people to even buy into of my label if I've given artists, like the lion's share? And so I don't know if you two are seeing that now, in the label side of music. Like, are my artists worth more than my own admin share as a label head? Kind of posing that question, if that makes sense. Oh, you're on mute, Ben.
I was
Sorry.
deferring to Ben. I would
So great question, Katrina, because I've seen the more traditional model, right, where the label is, I advance you, but I own everything, right? And I think, not I think, over the last really 4 years,
Oh, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me? No?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and I've seen in the past 5 years there's been a more conscious effort as it relates to the industry making sure that there is equity at the artist level. You know, there was a recent announcement, I know even with I believe it was Universal, with respect to them saying that, hey, we're not going to pay, you know, the investors within, you know, people who are just investors in terms of music publishing catalogs. It's got to go through the artist first, which provides a, you know, a wall there, kind of a stopgate. So it's challenging, especially for someone like yourself, where you're making a conscious effort to do your part, but at the same time you're like, well, I need to make sure that I'm, you know, not just being the low cost provider, that I'm not being, you know, just getting into the game of high volume and, you know, low margin at the end of the day, right? So, you know, I think it becomes a balance, and you know, just from a business standpoint, it's kind of, you know, I think that there are certain relationships that are maybe worthy of, lack of better words, a thinner margin share, and then there's times in the beginning where, you know, hey, I'm here with you and I need to share in that. But you know, as long as there's transparency of saying, hey, this is the path that we're going, and if we meet these milestones, the nature of the relationship should change over time, right? And you know, some people may appreciate that, some people don't. You know, I think it's a case by case basis, but you know, as it relates to, you know, myself, like in working with labels and so forth, you know, it's been a great relationship for me and learning experience, because you know, I've had the opportunities to help them grow by using their equity share and so forth. But no, I feel your pain, because you know, I as somebody that's been in the industry a long time like yourself, and successful, and you want to see people, you know, kind of protect themselves from themselves, because the nature of that industry can sometimes, you know, I don't want to say predatory, but for those that are unaware, you know, not truly understand what they're giving up, but at the same time still making sure that your equity investment is realized.
Yeah.
So it's
You know
a
what?
challenge.
One of the things that we've found in working with labels in a variety of different capacities is that we've tried to encourage the labels to make sure that they're educating their artists and putting those artists into strong accounting and financial business relationships. So as disciplined as you've been, Katrina, you probably need to make sure that you're having those same conversations with your artist clients, because if you're going to essentially attach your success to their success, you want to make sure that they have the same principles and discipline that you have. So, in getting them introduced to financial institutions, getting them introduced to cash flow management, getting them introduced to those things, ultimately, even though your revenue share is much smaller, in the end, everyone's going to win, because you've created an opportunity for them to build the sustainability that's also going to flow towards you as far as sustainability. So I think that those are going to be important things to keep into consideration. So I guess we're going to get ready to wrap up in a moment. So if there are any last words that you would like to share with the audience, just takeaway nuggets that you would just like to dispense to them, we certainly can use these last few minutes for that. So, you know, Cassandra, if you want to share something, we can go to Katrina and then Ben, and then we'll turn it back over to Portia.
Thank you, Tony. I'd just like to say, just really thank you to you and Portia for the opportunity. I think just the exposure to artists on this platform, and to be able to let people know that we're a resource in the community, and you can have an account wherever you are. We're located in the Deep South, but to have an account with an organization that is doing some of the work, intentional work about serving underserved communities, I think is a win for everybody. So just thank you.
I will say thank you. I'm definitely going to look that up then. That was my first question for you, Cassandra. I was like, so can I get an account?
Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. Great. But also I think just reminding like of my journey, just saying it out loud, it's really vulnerable, you know, because it just can be chock full of mistakes. You know, I'm not an accountant, I'm not a CPA, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm just gonna like assume I've made mistakes, but it doesn't mean I haven't stopped trying. And I think, you know, for those of you out there that maybe feel like this conversation still feels a little intimidating, I hope that you see faces behind the words and you see people who really care. And, you know, and if you have questions, it's going to be on you to ask it. And so really, you're the only one that's losing out when you don't ask the questions. So, you know, I am so curious. I ask everybody questions. If I see an artist doing well or another label head or an executive, I always, pre-COVID, would take them to lunch and be like, how are you making money? How are you turning a profit? You know, I just have no shame because we're in this together. We're peers. I think competition should drive us to be better. And especially in the Black community, you need to be asking questions when you see someone doing well. And you should be willing to take 30 minutes when you see someone not doing well either. You know, you see someone constantly using a credit card. I mean, I've been on the road with those artists. I have always sat them down and been like, what is going on here? I haven't paid you. Like, why are you spending money? You know, I know there is no money on there, you know, so really having those questions and asking those questions and being available. And it's okay to not have the answers, but just keep asking questions. And just really grateful to you, Tony, constantly pushing me and encouraging me to go back and talk to my artists with this much tenacity, and I will do that and report back. And just grateful to Music Biz Association, and really happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. Tony, Portia, really appreciate you all putting on this platform. You know, I think for those that are listening, there was a lot of gems shared here today, different perspectives, industry perspective, credit union, traditional bank. And I think for those that are listening, if you take some of these gems, really digest them, and you can figure out, you know, who and what works best for you. You know, the one last thing, parting words that I would like to share with everyone is to, you know, educate yourself about banking, build a relationship, be disciplined. These are all the consistent themes that I think were said by all of us on this panel. And to really, you know, utilize the, I try to instill in my own children the 5 P's. You know, proper preparation, you know, prevents poor performance. And I think, you know, it is in a situation with banking, if you want to go about it and be just transactional, meaning, hey, I'm going to deal with it only when I need it, then guess what? The outcome might be just that. It might just be quick and transactional, and oftentimes it's a no. But if you really plan and you put it in a category of relationship and understanding who you're building a relationship with, your outcome most times will be a very positive one. So I just really, you know, hope that everyone takes the time and effort and gets involved and engaged in their banking process, because it can be a very heartbreaking experience, especially if something's on the line as it relates to your growth. And your financial partner can help you achieve some of your life goals. So you know, I say continue to grind, but don't forget about the importance of building a relationship with your bank.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Cassandra, Katrina, Ben. We appreciate it. And we love everything that you've said today. And we know that somebody has been helped. So at this time, we'll turn it back over to Portia. Thank you so much.
You guys, thank you so much. That panel was just as great as I knew it would be. So we appreciate you so much for doing this, and you dropped so many gems. I know that a lot of people got a lot out of this. And thank you so much, Tony, for doing a great job moderating.
It was my pleasure.